which is this idea of rest. The idea of false rest and true rest, the idea of being led into and promised rest. It's all about rest. And so we've called this series Exhausted because I think that's hashtag super relatable. I don't know if you've been to that point where you're like, oh my gosh, I am so tired. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier, and she works nights, and she's tired. I think most of us are in this season of life, especially now after the holidays, where it's kind of back at it, right? It's like back at work. And so often, if we don't set up our lives right, it can lead to a sense of fatigue and tiredness, and that can really affect our spiritual lives. If we don't have the energy to come to God, then we're not going to do it, right? It's kind of simple. So to kind of get ready for this series, I did something fun. I watched a couple hours, and I mean hours, of commercials. Why would you do that, Josh? Because I'm crazy. Commercials. I watched commercials from like industries that are trying to sell us rest, right? So I watched a bunch of mattress commercials. Anybody have a Casper mattress? No? Okay. That's the one that like it ships to you, and you like open the bag, and it goes, and it's like, whoa, that's cool. So anyway, it made me want a Casper mattress. Anyway, so I watched mattress commercials, and I also watched a bunch of vacation tourist commercials. Now, this is really interesting, because when you do this kind of survey, let me say this first. The reason that I looked into that is because if you want to know what Americans think about anything, you should look at commercials. And here's why. Because companies spend millions of dollars figuring out what we think, how we tick, the beliefs that we have, our values, in order to sell us their products. And so when you look at commercials, you should know it's not just, they didn't just make that commercial willy-nilly, and they're like, oh, here's a cool mattress. I hope you like it. No, what they did was they researched and they studied you to figure out how to get you to buy that mattress. So anyway, my point is, when you look at commercials, it's really revealing about what we as a culture think about something. So I looked at vacation spots and mattress companies, and here's the thing. In every single vacation spot commercial, you're going to get three things. It's kind of preaching this message: rest is a beach, a beer, and a companion. Every single tourist video, every Carnival cruise video, and in the last service I said every commercial for Tallahassee, Florida. Nobody goes to Tallahassee, Florida. Why did that even jump in my mind? I meant to say Miami. Anyway, I told you a mistake. So I've never seen a commercial for Tallahassee yet. But anyway, but you'll see this over and over, that there's a beach, a beer, and a friend, or friends. And kind of what they're trying to say is that come here, because when you're here, you'll get some rest. You'll have some friends to hang out with. There's a beach here, right? And that's kind of what they're selling. That's how they're selling you rest, because that's what they think you think rest is. Similarly, if you look at mattress companies, rest is a cuddle and a supportive mattress. If you watch mattress companies, nobody ever sleeps alone. Everybody's cuddled in a mattress commercial. Isn't that interesting? They think that in order to sell you a mattress, you have to think, oh, if I buy this mattress, I'm going to get a cuddle. Like that's what Does anybody else find this fascinating? Am I the only one? Like, this is like, what? That's crazy. But here's my point. Here's what I'm trying to get to. I think in our culture, we're sold this version of rest. We're kind of preached this message of rest, and it's this, that rest is a place, right? That rest is a place. Rest is your Casper mattress after you've unzipped it, and you get to lay on that cloud, right? Rest is, I almost did it again. It's not Tallahassee. It's Miami, Florida, where all of your friends are, and then there's a beach there. Rest is a place that you go to. And here's the interesting thing about that. It makes it an especially good selling point, because rest is not where you are. Think about that. What they're trying to sell you is that rest is a place where not, other than here. Rest is a place where you go to. Rest is something you don't have right now. Whereas, and I think I would compare this with the Christian message, and the Bible talks a lot about rest, but here's kind of very generally what the Bible teaches about rest, is that rest is not a place, rest is a person. And the advantage to this position is that every single moment of your life is an invitation to grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus, to grow deeper into Him who gives you true rest. That's the message of the Bible. I quote this verse all the time because it's one of my favorites. In Romans 5, Paul says that the Spirit pours his love into our hearts. That on some level, a relationship with God, what it's like is that he gives you blessings. He gives you peace. He gives you comfort. He gives you rest. True rest is a person, not a place. And that's kind of the biblical idea of what rest is. When we enter his rest in heaven, what do we get? We get him. That's what heaven's about, is seeing him face to face. Rest is not a place, it's a person. And what we're going to see today in this passage is he's going to give us a warning. Now, if you've been with us last week, or a couple weeks ago actually, we went through one of the warnings in the book of Hebrews. So the book of Hebrews has several warnings where he kind of stops the flow of his argument, and he says, so because Jesus is so good, watch out. Because he's so wonderful, keep watch. Like make sure that you're not walking away from him. And that's kind of the core, big idea of the message that we're going to be, or the passage that we're going to be in today. He's going to say, look out, lest you fall away. Now, what's really important about a warning is to understand it, right? Sometimes I think that brownie boxes should have like a little label that says, warning, you're going to eat a ton of these and you're going to gain a lot of weight. I don't know this. I mean, I know it, but I don't know it. You know what I mean? And I wish there was like a little warning. Now, here's the thing. The important thing about that warning is that I get it, right? If you saw on candy or some kind of sweet, your favorite sweet, a warning that said, hey, this isn't great for you, you would know what that means, right? Because it's language. But here's the thing. Sometimes when we talk about don't fall away from God, I think it's hard to know what exactly that means. And so here's what we're going to do, and this is what the author of Hebrews does. He kind of shows you what it means. He's going to offer a case study. So we're going to see the case of falling away, and we're going to see the cause. He tells you why it is people fall away, and then we're going to see the cure. He gives a prescription, a way to fix the problem. He gives you a solution, the cure. So first, we're going to look at the case. And actually, first, we're going to look at the warning. So I want to read the warning, and then we're going to skip a couple verses and kind of go to the case study, okay? So this is verse 12. He says this, take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart leading you, to fall away from the living God. That's the warning. Now we're going to move to the case. It's in verse 15. So he's warning you, don't fall away from the living God. And he's going to talk about this story that's found in Numbers 14. I'm going to read what he says. He says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. For who were those who heard and yet rebelled? Was it not those who left Egypt, led by Moses? And with whom was he provoked for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who were disobedient? So we see that they were unable to enter because of unbelief. Okay, now we're asking this question, what does it mean to fall away? And if you're following on the screen, you saw that I have a lot of underlined words because he uses a lot of words to describe what it means to fall away. Yeah, thank you, I want to put this up here. One of those is a hard heart. You know what that means? A hard heart is a heart that's closed off to God. It's not open to him, it's closed, it's hard, he can't get in. Another one is rebellion, or to draw battle lines against God. He uses the word provoking, constantly trying to see, is this going to make you angry? Is this going to make you angry? It reminds me, I took a road trip with a really annoying kid one time, and the whole time he did this thing, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. That's provoking. Anyway, I wrote, it was a friend of mine, and no, you don't know him. Anyway, I put the word open sin up there, because if you look back and you read that story, they are flagrantly crossing the line. What they're doing is they're very obviously rebelling against God. They didn't make a whoopsie, right? This wasn't a mistake. They didn't fall into this. All of a sudden, they choose to draw battle lines against God. It's an intentional disobedience. Those ones on the left, on the right, if you go and you read the story, this is what how God characterizes their falling away. He says that they despised me. They despised God. He says that they've gathered against me. So I want you to see all of this, because we're going to kind of put this all together. Here's what falling away is, and here's kind of what the author of Hebrews concludes. He says it's unbelief. Check that out in verse 19. He says, "So we see that they were unable to enter his rest because of unbelief." And maybe you can see how a hard heart, how you would develop that because you don't believe that he's good. Why wouldn't you let him in? Well, because I don't like him. Because he's not good. And you can see how an unbelief, I don't believe in the goodness of God, that would cause you maybe to harden your heart. Or maybe you can see how unbelief leads to rebellion. I don't believe that his way is the best way. I don't believe that his way is the good way. I'm going to follow this way. I don't believe in him. Unbelief is kind of the root of all of these things. And so what he's saying here is watch out, take care, don't fall away. And what that means is you get to a place where your heart just genuinely does not believe in who he is. And I want to talk about what it is, because it's also really important to know what it's not. Did you catch like how intense those words were? Rebellion, a hard heart, flagrant open sin, intentional disobedience, drawing battle lines against God. Here's what I think is important, and I want to give you today. I want to start, before we dig a little deeper, I want to give you a little bit of assurance, okay? Because very often in church, people like to use passages like this to make you very afraid that God's love can't conquer your sin, right? Like sometimes it's easy to take this passage and talk about how sinful and disgusting you are, so disgusting that he's gonna get rid of you, all the while forgetting the message of the cross. All the while forgetting one of my favorite parables that Jesus tells is the parable of the lost sheep, right? What does Jesus do when one of his children wander off? He leaves the 99 and he goes and gets that one. So you got to remember this, that you are, if you're a Christian, if you have faith in Jesus, you're secure in his love, in his sacrifice, in what he did. It's not necessarily about what you did. And so I want you to, we're going to approach this not from a place of fear, but from a place of confidence. Because it's very easy to use this passage to get you to question the goodness of God when all he's saying is don't question the goodness of God. And so it's kind of interesting how we can twist this stuff to make you question who he is when the very point is not to do that. So here's what I want to say. A concept that might help us understand this. If you look in the scriptures, there's actually 3 types of faith. Okay, so here's the first one, faithfulness. Anybody in here, if you've ever read Hebrews 11, we're going to get there in a couple of weeks, but Hebrews 11 is a list of people who were faithful. They call it the Faith Hall of Fame. And in that list are some really bad people. Take like Abraham. Abraham is kind of referred to as the father of the faith, the father of the Jewish people. And there's this moment where Abraham, actually on 2 occasions, enters into a city, and the ruler of that city says, "Hey, I really like your wife." And Abraham says, "Oh, good news. She's not my wife. She's my sister. Go ahead, take her." He's not a great dude, okay? But he's listed as somebody who is faithful. Another person in this list is David. David is called a man after God's own heart. He's faithful to God. But similarly, he has a moment where he actually has a guy killed so that he can have that guy's wife. They're not a great dude, okay? Here's my point. Faithfulness isn't perfection. Faithfulness isn't taking a snapshot of your life where you messed up and saying, well, I messed up here, so then I must not be faithful. No. Here's what faithfulness is. Faithfulness is every time you fail, every time you fall, every time you find yourself defeated, you stand up and you fight back again. That's what these guys did. Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. David, you see this over and over in David's life. He gets defeated, pushed back, but every time he writes a psalm about it, and he's like, God, I done messed up, man, but your love is so good. Faithfulness is not about perfection. It's about grit. It's about standing up even when you've been pushed down. That's faithfulness, okay? And I want to show you this too. There's also unfaithfulness. I want you to think about, maybe you've heard this before, that in James talks about how the demons and Satan, they believe that God exists, but they don't follow him, right? So catch this for a second. It is possible to believe in the God of the Bible, believe that he exists, but to be completely against him. It's not the kind of faith that saves you. It's not the kind of faith that brings you and unites you to God. It's the kind of faith that's evil, and it actually divides you. And so here's what I think the author of Hebrews is saying. He's saying, hey, watch out, be careful. Make sure that every time you doubt, you're getting back up. Every time you fall, you're standing back up. Every time that you are defeated, you get right back to it. Make sure that you are faithful and don't slip into unfaithfulness. I think this is also true of the Pharisees. Jesus talks about the Pharisees a lot, and he says, or to the Pharisees a lot, and one of the things he says is that you're a whitewashed tomb. He says you look good on the outside, but on the inside, you're dead. It's this unfaithfulness. You believe that God exists. You're trying to follow his ways, but really you've drawn battle lines against him. You're an open rebellion. So let me cover this too. Here's the third type you see is faithlessness. People who just don't believe at all. So those are kind of just very generally, you could probably actually delineate more off of those, but those are very generally the three types of faith that you find. So here's my point. When we look at the case, what is falling away? Falling away is drawing up battle lines against God because you fundamentally do not believe in his goodness. You believe that he's wrong. You believe that you should be against him. And I want to be careful here because he gives a strong warning, right? He's like, make sure that you're not flipping into this. Make sure that you don't find yourself falling away from God. But I also want to give you a little bit of comfort as well. That word falling away, in the English, it sounds kind of passive, right? Like I tripped and I fell. It wasn't necessarily my fault. I fell away. But in the Greek, it's actually a very active term. It's actually the word that we get apostasy from. Anybody ever heard that? That's an old word, apostasy. It just means to literally not be for God, but against God. So here's what I want to say. You're not going to wake up one morning and be like, oh, dang it, I guess I'm unfaithful now. No, it's a long progression, a decision of your will. It is fundamentally something that you do and that you are very aware of. Like the demons are. And so here's the whole point. Here's the case. This is what falling away is. It starts with unbelief, and it leads your heart into dark places where you fall away from God. And his warning is, watch out. Make sure that you're not getting into this. That's the case. Here's the cause. Here's what causes that. Let's pick it up again in verse 12. We're going to read that warning one more time. It says this. Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. I want you to focus on that phrase, hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. What is it that hardens your heart? To him, it's the deceitfulness of sin. Now, this is very in keeping with the rest of Scripture, right? So in the beginning, the first sin happens because Eve is deceived. She believes a lie. And so then she eats the fruit, and then all of a sudden, the world is broken. Sin enters into the world. She did so because she was deceived. Also in Romans 1, Paul says that everybody who sins exchanges the truth about God for a lie. There's a deceitfulness. That every sin really stems out of belief in a lie, in something that's not true. And maybe this is easy to see, right? Like maybe you know people in your life who really believe that it's healthy and wonderful to hold and nurse a grudge against somebody. Right? Like maybe you know somebody who just they believe that that's okay and it's not hurting them and it's not tearing them up inside. It's just okay. And they believe this lie that's leading them to really have a loss of peace and rest in their lives. Or maybe you know somebody who really genuinely believes that it is so good for them to go out and just kind of party on the weekends and come to church on Sundays and be the good Christian on a Sunday morning, but live a completely different life during the week. Or maybe you know somebody who really believes that being good in Christian circles is about a checklist. I've done this. I don't need a relationship with him. I just did all the things. It's deceitfulness of sin. It lies to you and leads you into sin. Now, that's kind of how sin works. That's the cause. But I want to, especially in Christian circles, it's really easy to justify your sin, right? Here's a part of the deceitfulness, is it tricks us into making a case for ourselves that what we're doing is right. I talked to a guy who grew up in a very legalistic church, and he said, you're good. You're a good legalist when you can use the Bible to justify sinning. Because you know it so well that you can pick and choose little passages that make it okay to do whatever you want to do. And this has actually happened throughout the history of the church. You think about like the Crusades, and a lot of what's happening in the Catholic Church right now is a lot of using Scripture to defend yourself against to defend yourself against having your sin exposed. And so what happens then is it leads to this sin. So justifying your sin is a really interesting thing because we trick ourselves. So what I want to do for the next 3 minutes is go over 3 ways that you know you're justifying. 3 ways you know that you are yourself deceiving yourself so that sin can deceive you. Okay, so here's the first one: resting on your strengths. Man, this is a good one because I think especially church people, they think that they're good. They don't have to heed this warning. They don't have to pay attention because look at all the good things I've done. Here's all the things that I do in my life. I give, I pray, I read, I meet people for coffee, I evangelize, but I don't have to do anything about this porn addiction over here because look at all this good stuff, right? And very often what happens is like strict people think that they're really good because they don't listen to that music, they don't engage in they don't watch that movie. They think that they're good because they're resting on these strengths here, and what's happening is they're actually distracted. I'm good because of this, but they don't look at all of this. And so I think this is awesome because Jesus really takes this away from us. This is Isaiah 64. Isaiah says this to Israel because this is a problem throughout the history of the people of Israel. He says this: "We have all become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous," thanks guys, "and all our righteous deeds are like a polluted garment." I want you to see this. That what Isaiah is saying is when you come to God and you have all this, your self-goodness, all of the things that make you good, your strengths, you come to God and you're like, God, look what I did. God's standard of perfection is so high that to him, all your good deeds are so low that the phrase is polluted garment. You got to see that for God, resting on your strengths is not what Christianity is about. What Christianity is about resting in his strength. David says all the time, over and over in the Psalms, he says, I love you, O Lord, my strength. David calls God his strength. He's resting on what he does and not what David does. He's resting on his love and not David's love for him. He's resting on God's faithfulness and not his own faithfulness. Sometimes we know that we're deceiving ourselves when we rest on our goodness instead of as an excuse to not look at our sin. That's number one. Here's number two: running from your weaknesses. This is very common. Sometimes, I don't know if you've ever been to this point where you messed up. You hurt the person. You engaged in your addiction. Maybe if you fell, you did something that was really, really bad, and you get to this point where you're like, I don't even know if I can pray. Like, can I even talk to him? Like if I talk to him because I'm so bad, is he just going to kill me? As a pastor, you hear this joke all the time. If I set foot in that church, God would strike me dead immediately. And it's a joke, but like underneath, there's they believe it a little bit, Like, I don't know if you've ever been to that point where you feel like you're so bad that you can't come to God. Here's what happens. Excuse me. When you get that mentality, when you get that mindset, is you start looking for rest in other things, and so you run to other things to give you that peace. And very often it happens, or what you find that rest in, and it's a lie. You find it in being numb, just completely numbing yourself to the pain and the guilt of your past. I want to read this songs from this. I want to read lyrics from this song. And you're going to recognize the song when I get to the chorus, but nobody knows the words. But she expresses this running away from the weakness and resting in other things so well. She says this: "Party girls don't get hurt. Can't feel anything. When will I learn? I push it down, push it down. I'm the one to call for a good time. Phone's blowing up. They're ringing my doorbell. I feel the love, feel the love." She says, "Help me. I'm holding on for dear life. Won't look down, won't open my eyes. Keep my glass full until morning light. because I'm just holding on for tonight. Party girls don't get hurt, can't feel anything. I push it down. It says the sun is up and I'm a mess. Got to get out now. Got to run from this. Here comes the shame. And here's the chorus. I'm going to swing from the chandelier. I'm going to live like tomorrow doesn't exist. I'm going to fly like a bird through the night, feel my tears as they dry. You recognize that song. It's Sia. Chandelier. Now, here's the crazy thing. That's a club song. You play that in the clubs, and she is singing about the same thing that everybody's doing. You're numbing yourself to the pain of your past. You're trying to dance away your hurts, and you're trying to distract yourself from your mistakes. And what's happening, though, if you can kind of feel it in the song, there's tears just beneath the surface. Like she's running and she knows it. And I think that like part of that song is like a cry for help. She even says, "Help me." But I think so often when we get in this cycle of running from our weakness, we run to things to numb us and distract us instead of running to the one who can give us true rest. In Matthew 11:28 says this, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Sometimes when we're running from our weaknesses and we find the distraction and the numbness and we think that that's it, but that's false rest. You're not really healed. You're not delivered. You're actually continuing the cycle. So that's running from your weaknesses. That's a number 2 way that you're justifying. I don't want to come to God. I don't want to come to the one who can fix it because I'm so scared of the pain. I'm so scared of what I'm guilty of. I'm so scared of him. Here's the third one. It says the third one is doing for God instead of being with God. The key word in that is instead, right? It's a good thing to do stuff for God. But here's the thing. Sometimes we get, as Christians, trapped in this cycle of I'm doing all of these things for him, and because I'm doing these things, I don't need to be with him. Can you see how we justify that there? I've done X, Y, and Z, so today I'm good. I don't need to read my Bible. I don't need to engage in a relationship with God because look how good I am. Doing for God instead of being with God. God's the only one who gives you rest, right? And so sometimes we use this idea of doing for God to justify not seeking real rest in him, but resting in our strength. It's doing for God instead of being with God. That's the case. So we saw the case, and that's the cause. It's the deceitfulness of sin, and sometimes a part of the deceitfulness of sin is that we deceive ourselves and we justify what we're doing in order to sin more. So that's the cause. Let's look at the cure really quick here. Continue. I want to. First one is in verse 12. He says this: "Take care." I love that. "Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God." He says that word "take care" is really interesting. That word in the Greek it means hey, look out, keep watch. When I was little, my dad made me play Little League. Baseball. Baseball's the worst sport in the world. Come on, he said. It's the worst. And I think that there's more action in a knitting group than baseball. But that's just, I don't know. I'm clearly biased. But anyway, so as a kid, I'm playing baseball, and you go to these tournaments or whatever they're called, and there's have you ever been to that place? There's like 7 baseball diamonds in like a circle, right? You ever seen that? And what would happen, and this is the one thing I remember from Little League Baseball, is you'd walk into this complex, and every 15 minutes or so, somebody would hit a ball, and it would fly up and outside of the baseball diamond, and everybody shouts, "Heads up!" because there's a ball in the air. And if that ball hits you, it's very painful. One time I remember, I was going for a pop fly. This is traumatic. I was going for a pop fly, right? And I'm not going to knock that over. Okay. And I had my glove up, and my glove blocked my sight line to the ball, and the ball missed the glove and hit me right in the nose. And I was like 12, okay? I was 12 as a little boy, not little boy, I was 12. And I just like, instantly, I was like, oh my God, my nose. Baseball's the worst. Anyway, here's my point. What is my point? Oh yeah, he said when you go to the baseball diamond, they're yelling "heads up." That's what this word is. It's saying, "Hey, pay attention. Look out. There's something going on here, and if you don't see it, you're going to get hit by it." Muhammad Ali is a boxer. He has a great quote. He says, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. You can't hit what your eyes can't, anybody know? See. You can't hit what your eyes can't see. And it's so true. You can't take care of, you can't get rid of, you can't fight, you can't dodge, you can't help, or you can't fix anything that you're not aware of, that you can't see. And so what the author of Hebrews is saying, he's saying, take care, look at this. Make sure you're examining your soul on a regular basis, because if you don't, then some of the things that we listed earlier might creep in, the hardness of heart, the rebellion against God, and it grows and it grows. And this is what's true, is that sin always grows in the dark. If you're not looking at it, it's only going to grow. There's a great exercise. Steve talked about it last week. It's called the Examen, but and it's Catholic. But here's kind of a translated version. Okay, this is a great way to examine your heart. Twice a day, just twice a day, ask yourself these two questions. Ask, where did God show up today? Where did God show up today? Did you know that every good and perfect gift comes from God? That's a verse. What happened that was good for you this morning? Did you connect with your friend before you walked in here, and that was good? That was good to your heart? Was the worship good for you? Did you meet God in that moment? Where was God for you today? If you don't ask that question, you're going to walk through your life, and God's going to be constantly providing for you and loving on you, and you're going to miss it. And so it's a great question to ask yourself. Where did God show up today? Here's the one that kind of pertains to what we're talking about. Where was my heart today? Was my heart gossiping and jealous? Was my heart bitter and enraged? Was my heart fearful and anxiety-ridden? Where was your heart today? It's a great question to ask, because when you examine your heart, then you know what you're doing is your head's up, you're looking out, you're making sure that you know where your heart is. So that's one thing about the cure. Here's another one, verse 13. He says, "But exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin." Now, we talked about that last part, but here's the first part of that verse again. "But exhort one another every day." And so here's what he's saying. That word exhort is a great Greek word. It's parakaleo, and it literally means to come alongside. And so part of the cure for him is to be involved in a community in which people come alongside you. What's so beautiful about the Christian religion is it's not something you ever do alone. In Christianity, what we believe is that you belong to a greater community of people who love Jesus, who are pursuing him, and you get to be in a place where people don't, and they shouldn't cast judgment upon you. They shouldn't criticize you, but they come alongside you. They enter your life and walk with you. And what's kind of beautiful about this is that it provides a framework for you to say, hey, man, you got to watch out, because what you're doing here, it's leading to the deceitfulness of sin. Sin's deceiving you in this way. But when you say that in the context of coming alongside somebody, of entering into their life to help them, to walk with them through what they're doing, that's not judgment or criticism, that's help. That's not like shaming, that's like, man, I'm so glad I'm here with you. Parakaleo means come alongside. Let me finish. I want to conclude with this idea. This is in verse 14. It says, "For we have come to share in Christ, if indeed we hold to our original confidence to the end." This is the last thing about the cure. This is what he says, hold to your original confidence. You know what's so cool about the book of Hebrews? For the author of Hebrews, he uses this word to hold over and over and over again. For him, the Christian life is about holding on to something. In this instance, he's talking about holding fast to your original confidence. I heard a pastor say once that faith is looking back to the past to see the goodness of God. It's about looking back to see how God has showed up for you. It's about looking back to see how God has provided for you. It's about looking back to see all the ways that God has showed up and helped you out and delivered you and blessed you and loved on you. And when you see that, when you see how he has shown up in your day, in your week, or in your 2 years ago, 20 years ago, when you see his goodness, it gives you confidence for the future. That's what faith is. It looks back to see where God has shown up so that you can know what to expect in the future. I'm going to invite the rest of the band up, and as they're coming up, I want to just kind of give you this idea. That in this Christian life, one of the ways that we defeat the deceitfulness of sin is by holding fast to your confidence. Because that's what sin wants to lie about. Sin wants to tell you that God isn't good. That was the first lie, remember? Satan says to Eve, did he really say that? Is he really looking out for you? The way that it wants to get you to unbelief is to question how good he is. And sometimes what holding fast is worshiping.